Hello, today's lesson is Daniel 6. In case you have missed it, let us have a brief recap of what we've learned so far about the book of Daniel. First, we know that it is one of the 5 major prophetic books in the Old Testament. It is also an apocalyptic book, meaning that it addresses end-time prophecies. The book of Daniel can be divided into 2 parts. The first 6 chapters has to do with events in his life, and the last 6 chapters are a narrative of his visions and his dreams. The book of Daniel is very important to us because Jesus refers to the book of Daniel in Matthew 24, the chapter that he declares a lot of his end time prophecies in. What we know about Daniel is that over 500 years before Jesus came, he was a captive among all the captives taken from Israel and brought to the land of Babylon by Nebuchadnezzar II. He lived to a ripe old age under 4 kings: Nebuchadnezzar II, Belshazzar, Darius I, and Cyrus II. The name Daniel means God is my judge. We know that Daniel had 3 good friends: Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These are the names given to them by the captors. And these 3 friends of Daniel prayed with him, and they were promoted along with him. They also showed faith in God. In chapter 1, we see that one of the first things to happen to Daniel and his friends in captivity was that they had to reject pagan practices. So one of the things they rejected was the kind of food they were being offered. And in the end, it proved that God's way of doing things was better. They prospered. They were given wisdom, and also their bodies proved that they were doing the right thing. In chapter 2, Daniel is called to interpret King Nebuchadnezzar's dream. And this he did successfully after praying to God and God revealing what the dream meant. In the end, what the dream meant was that all kingdoms of this earth will be replaced, will be supplanted by the kingdom of God. In chapter 3, we see that although Nebuchadnezzar got the warning that the kingdom of God is bigger than all the earthly kingdoms, past, present, and future, he seemed to have rejected that. And he built a full statue of gold representing himself and his kingdom. And he demanded that everyone bow to it. Well, Daniel's friends did not bow, and they were thrown into fire. But God kept them, and God preserved them. And the king had to acknowledge that, in fact, the God of heaven was the one who rules. He was the God of the kingdom. In chapter 4, we see that Nebuchadnezzar still refused to acknowledge the God of heaven in the end. And at some point, he was lifted up in pride and said, "Whoa, look what I have done. I am the great king." And so God brought him down. God made him become mad for 7 years, although God preserved his kingdom. And after 7 years, he lifted up his eyes and gave praise to God and acknowledged God, and God raised him back to his kingdom. So in chapter 4, he sends out a letter acknowledging God and demanding that the full praise be given to the God of heaven. In chapter 5, we see that Belshazzar, the son of Nebuchadnezzar, ignored all the history of his father, and he even dishonored God by using holy things in a common way, with his concubines and his people celebrating to other gods, using the things dedicated to the holy God of heaven. And even when God warned him with a writing on the wall that made him frightened, he still disobeyed God by giving honor to Daniel and giving him promotion and putting on clothes on him. And that very night, God destroyed him. God killed him. So then, over the last few weeks, we have learned a number of things. One, we learned that even in captivity, God is still sovereign. No matter where we are, once we are there as Christians, once we are there as people of God, guess what? God's rulership is there. And even our bosses are subject to God. We also learn that once we get somewhere, we have to put aside pagan practices. We cannot practice what other people practice because we want God's blessing. We also see that Daniel got a prophecy about the end times and about the coming kingdom of God, that it will replace and have glory, taking all kingdoms, past, present, and future, will be replaced by the kingdom of God. The kingdom of God comes first. We also saw that it is bad to rebel against God. When God says something, you don't establish your own rules and expect that God is going to respect that. And so we saw how kings were humbled because of their disobedience and disrespect of the things of God. And it's a good lesson for us also to learn to respect God's things, to honor God's kingdom, and to put aside pagan practices. Now let us look at today's lesson. Our main conclusion in reading Daniel 6 is that God will rescue his people. He wants to rescue us from the condemnation of the law. Yes, we have done wrong things, we have thought wrong things, and truthfully, none of us deserve salvation. But God, in his mercy, will shut the lion's mouth. We are no longer under condemnation, but now we are free to serve God, free to be his servants, free to enter into salvation. We give God thanks for that, and we give God thanks for the lesson we see in Daniel 6. The rest of Daniel now has to do with Daniel's visions and dreams, and we have to interpret those. Many of them have to do with end times. And Daniel, as we said before, was referenced by Jesus, and so that's why he's so important. And interestingly, Daniel refers to other prophets also. So we look forward to seeing the other lessons and learning them. God bless you, and thanks for coming to today's lesson.